Hello, and welcome to a conversation with Phylicia Rashad. My name is Harriette Cole, and it is my honor to introduce this series that AARP is offering to all of you. We're so excited to bring people from the African American diaspora, people in the arts, people in business, entrepreneurs, people in public service, people who can inspire us to be the best that we can be. We thought it was a great time to talk to folks in the Black community who are reaching for the stars and living during this time of great pivoting so that they can inspire us to see how we may be able to pivot and just enjoy life to the fullest. So, we're launching this series today. It will be a weekly series every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern. You can come to AARP Black Community and listen to great conversations with some of our leaders. And today, I'm thrilled to say that we are going to be talking to Phylicia Rashad. Now, many of you know her as American TV's favorite mom, Claire Huxtable from The Cosby Show. And I wonder if you know some of the other things that she's done. She's quite an outstanding actor, singer, director. Let me tell you some of the things that you may or may not know. She won the Tony Award for Best Actress in a Play in 2004 in Lorraine Hansberry's Raisin in the Sun. You might remember that Puffy was part of that production too. She won Best Actress in a Play. That was the first time that a Black woman has won that. In 1962, Diane Carroll won Best Actress in a Musical. Another first, but imagine all those years in between. And Phylicia won in 2004. Phylicia performed in many of August Wilson's productions, including Gem of the Ocean on Broadway. And then later, she actually directed. Her directorial debut was for Gem of the Ocean. I bet you may have seen her in Tyler Perry's film for Color Girls. You know, Ntozake Shange's play was made into a film. Tyler Perry made it. Phylicia Rashad was in it. She was in Good Deeds. It was another Tyler Perry film. Do you remember her in Empire? What I remember the most is that white suit. She kind of strutted in the room in this white suit, and it was all over. She was part of This Is Us. So many things. Right now, well, right before COVID, she had been working on a directorship for a play to open at the Apollo, and it is called Blue, written by Charles Randolph Wright. That unfortunately is on pause right now, but Phylicia Rashad is not on pause. She is right here with us, and I want to welcome right now my friend, the one and only Phylicia Rashad. Woohoo!
Woohoo! Hello, Harriet. Hello.
Oh, I'm so happy that you're here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's always good to talk to you.
Yeah, I knew that we were going to have fun and everybody can listen in. So,
Yeah.
so the first thing I want to ask Felicia, knowing the times that we are in,
Mhm.
is how are you and how's your family? How's your mama?
Oh,
How's everybody?
thank you for asking. We're all fine. And that's a real blessing to be able to say. We're all fine. Thank you for asking.
And tell us about your mother because she is quite the senior elder. How old is she now?
My mother's 96. She'll be 97 in July. It's not far from now. It's just a month and a half away. It's her birthday.
What a blessing.
She is very, very well. Vivian Ayers is her name, her maiden name. She was born in Chester, South Carolina. My mother's a poet and a
Mhm.
scholar and an arts activist and a great mother, a
And,
critical
and
thinker.
Felicia, one of the things that ARP talks about a lot is advocacy for our elders. And during this time of COVID,
Mhm.
it has been so difficult. I know my mother, who's 90, lives in a retirement community, and we can't see her. We haven't seen her for 3 months, 4 months actually, because that's the law. You cannot see them. Your mother is not living in one of those spaces. Tell us where she's living, how she's enjoying life right now.
Well, I brought her here to my home in New York, and she was with me for a while. And then my sister started stamping her little feet and saying, she needs to come be with me. And you know, the weather's going to be better here in the wintertime. And so mommy should come in. And so mama said,
She wasn't wrong about that.
Deborah's not wrong about a lot of things.
And in case anybody doesn't know, Felicia's sister is Debbie Allen,
Yeah.
who lives in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
So,
So she's with Debbie right now. And she is enjoying being well taken care of. She enjoys the weather very, very, very well.
mm,
She's in good spirits and continues to read about Aztecs and Mayans and the calendar and all those things.
so that mind is active.
Yeah, she's very active.
Oh, that's what a blessing.
Mhm.
That's incredible.
It
And
is.
you have a daughter who is in the business, like mother, like daughter, Condola Rashad.
Yeah.
Tell us, how is Condola? She's quarantining in her home, but how's she doing?
Actually, she's doing very well. And when things began to lift a little way, she decided to be her true self and take off on an adventure. Uh,
Ah,
but I'm not telling everybody what that adventure is. But she's very well. I hear from her every day, thank God, and she'll be with my mother soon.
oh, that's beautiful. You know,
Yeah.
everybody's asking where's the adventure? What's she doing? We'll
We'll
have to
talk
ask
about it when it's
her.
over. When it's over
We'll
with.
have to ask her.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, Felicia, I know one of the things that your mother, the poet, artist, activist, did when you were growing up in Texas was to take you and the family out of Texas. And for context, for folks who are listening and knowing, we are living in the age of COVID and we're living in the age of marching for racial equality.
Mm.
This is once again, but in a different way, perhaps, than in the past. I want you to take us back to that time when you were growing up and your mother chose to extract the family from the United States.
All right. I was growing up in Houston, Texas, and it was during a time of legal segregation. My mother had published two books, and she found the environment in Houston rather restrictive. We could go to the library only on Tuesday. I think there was one day a week African American people were allowed to go to the museum at one point. Those things did change over time. Um, she found it very restrictive. She had visited Mexico with my father some years before, and she just fell in love with it, with the people, with the culture, with the language. And she decided to take my sister and me to live in Mexico City. And we did not speak a word of Spanish,
Mhm.
and we did not know a soul.
And how old were you?
I was 13.
Oh, that's one of those times. That's a challenging time.
Very critical time.
And she decided to take you to Mexico. Why?
She wanted us to have another experience in life. My mother had always couched Jim Crow and racism in a way. It wasn't that we weren't aware of it, but in our home it did not define us.
Mhm.
Art defined us. Yeah, my
Like it does
brother.
now.
Yeah, my brother played trumpet, and she never quarreled with him when he painted horses on the walls. Oh yeah, he used to paint the most beautiful horses. He just paint them on the walls. They were fantastic. She never quarreled with stuff
Ooh.
like that. And Debbie was dancing, and I studied piano and art all the time. And she would actually bring us in from play with our friends, and teach us how to read music. My mother taught us how to read music. I couldn't even read, and she was teaching us how to read music. And it was the first lesson in fractions. She held up a candied Easter egg and she said, well, first she said, we're going to be in 4/4 time. And she explained what that meant: 4 beats to 1 measure. And she held up this candied Easter egg. She said, this is a whole note. It gets 4 beats. Then she divided it in half and said, now we have 2 half notes. each will get 2 beets. She continued to divide that egg up until she had divided it up into 16 pieces.
All right.
It was my first lesson in fractions,
And
unbeknownst
how
to
old were
me.
you?
Oh, I was about 5.
And you remember. So
Mhm.
the vivid imagery of your mother, the poet, the
Yes,
artist,
yes,
yeah, and
yes,
you have it
yeah.
in burned into your memory in a beautiful way.
Oh, yes, she had this huge desk. Oh, antiquated today. It was one of those desks where the typewriter had its own section underneath the top of the desk. You had to pull that
Sure.
whole thing out. Guess where she had it? In the
In the
kitchen.
kitchen. I knew it.
Yeah, yeah, that's so. So that's the way it was. It was
And so when
wonderful.
you were in Mexico,
Mhm.
being exposed to another culture, what did that experience do for you and your sense of identity?
Well, all of a sudden, we were in an international city,
Mhm.
and it wasn't necessary to couch anything. We had free access to all things. You could go anywhere. You could go to the grand theaters. You could go in the park. We spent a lot of time in El Palacio de Bellas Artes watching ballet folklorico.
Mhm.
We actually took up residence with a family who had a family member who was singing with ballet folklorico. My
Wow.
mother gave us an immersive experience because she changed residences every month in the city. So yes, she did. So the first month we lived in Hotel Texas, believe it or not. The
That's funny.
second, yeah, the second month we lived in Colonia de Villa Estrella, which was far, far from the center of Mexico City.
And Mexico City is huge. Just for people who
Huge,
haven't gone there, I
huge.
mean, it's as big as a country.
It's huge. It's huge.
Yeah.
And then we moved back down to El Centro, near the Monument of the Revolution. And then we moved to Chapultepec Morales, Colonia de Chapultepec Morales, which was further out towards the University of Mexico. So if you looked at the center, let's say this is the center,
Mhm.
Colonia de Villa Estrella is way over here. And you come
And
back
so
to the.
because you lived in all of these different places,
Mhm.
I mean, your mother was exposing you to as much as she could in the amount of time that you had.
She did. She
When
wanted
you
us
came
to be with the people.
when you came back,
Uh-huh.
did that experience how did that experience inform your re-immersion in it was still Jim Crow?
Well, something else had happened with me. I was in the 8th grade, and in the school I ended up going to, there was not an 8th grade that year. So they put me in the 9th grade.
Mhm.
I had been a straight A student, but now all of the classes, those core curriculum classes,
Mhm.
were being taught in Spanish because it was a bilingual school. And that particular year in the 9th grade, literature, grammar, math, science, all taught in Spanish. So I sat in the classroom and couldn't participate because I didn't know the language.
Mm.
And what happens when that happens? When you don't speak a language that everyone else is speaking, people begin to think that you don't think,
Mm.
that you're slow, that you're unintelligent, that you're not so bright. And as a child, you could begin to believe that about yourself. So it was a really fascinating time, yes. It was a time of discovery, yes. But it was also for me a lonely time because I
Mhm.
didn't have companions the way my sister did in her class. I didn't have that. So I felt, uh, I just was alone. I felt alone a lot.
Mhm.
Even though I wasn't left alone a lot, you understand
Mhm.
what I'm saying? I felt
Sure.
alone a lot. Imagine sitting in an algebra class trying to figure out an equation and you can't understand what the teacher is saying. And this is what happens to people who come to this country.
That's true.
This is what happens to Hispanic Americans who have come here and from other regions of the world too. When they don't speak English, it isn't that these people are not smart. It's just that they don't speak the language.
Right.
You know, it's a real mistake to think that people don't think because they're
Mhm.
not speaking the language that you speak.
And having had that experience and coming back and then, you know, re-immersing yourself in American life, knowing what you had learned, how
Mhm.
did that inform your steps?
Mm. Well, I had a much deeper appreciation for Mexican culture,
Mm,
and I couldn't stand to watch the Western movies anymore
mm,
because I knew none of that was true. I had been exposed to not only contemporary culture, but to its history. Well,
mhm.
great, magnificent history. Um, because I sat in a classroom for a semester and didn't understand the language and didn't read for an entire semester, I'd almost forgotten how to read. It can
Wow.
happen. It can happen. Because you see, we take it for granted, but these are things we do every day.
Mhm.
It's like a muscle, though. If you don't exercise the muscle, it becomes weak.
I hope folks heard that. That is so important. We have lots of muscles we need to exercise right now, don't we? All right,
Yes.
I'm going to move us along
Yeah, okay.
to Howard University, also my alma mater.
Yeah.
And, going to Howard, Howard is called the Mecca of the Black community. It has been that for so many years, generations, really. I mean, I remember when I got there from a Black neighborhood in Baltimore, a very wonderful neighborhood. I couldn't believe that there was a United Nations of Black people at Howard University. And I'm like, wow. And
Yeah.
my eyes were this big.
Yeah.
What was it like for you going to Howard and what made you choose Howard?
My father. My father was a graduate of the dental class of 1945. My father was a dentist, and he was in the School of Dentistry, which later became the College of Dentistry. Graduated in 1945, and when it was time for me to go to college, he said, "This is where you're going to go." Back in those days, you didn't tell your parents where you were going to go to school; they told you. And knowing that I was interested in theater, he said, "No, this is the perfect place for you to go." And he showed me magazines where the Howard University players
Yes.
had been sponsored by the United States State Department, had traveled to Europe and performed. And he said, "No, this is where you need to be." He was so right. Papa was
Absolutely.
so right. He was so right. So at first, the first night I cried.
Mm.
Yes, I did, because I missed my mama and I missed my daddy, and I curled up and I cried. I got over that real quick.
I bet you did.
Oh, yes, child. I got over that so quick. I went to that first dance, and that was the end of it.
So what
Howard
are
was
some
electric.
highlights? What are
It
some
was,
highlights from Howard?
oh, it was electric. You know, it was electric because all of a sudden you were immersed in an academic environment. Now, I've been in an academic environment. I came from a very fine high school, but it's different in college, you know.
Mhm.
People are, you know, it's the thing. And they're dropping language left and right, and you know how they do those little things, whatever they learned in class, whatever class that was. I mean, they just put that out there for you to play with. But there was a social movement that was going on
Yeah.
too. Okay, so this was on the heels of the civil rights movement when I
What were
was
your years there?
66 to 70.
Right. So you were there when Dr. King was assassinated.
Yes, I was.
What
Yes,
do you remember?
I remember smoke and
Mm.
fire. I remember shock, awe, disbelief, and then we looked out of the window and saw smoke in no time at all.
Mhm.
and rage and anger and uh, outrage. It's like, you know, no, no.
What did the students do on campus at that time when Dr. King was assassinated?
What the students did was done before. Uh, I think it was done before his assassination. We had taken over the administration building
Hmm.
because we wanted Afrocentric classes. Everything was Eurocentric. Here we are at the Mecca of Black education, and there are no Afrocentric classes. What kind of sense does this make? What we did, though, was in taking over that building, it wasn't chaotic. We organized study groups. We were studying inside the building. We didn't stop our no, we didn't stop our education. We didn't stop our learning. We didn't stop our disciplines. That's what was happening inside that building. And people in the neighborhood, out of respect for us, because we were so orderly, we weren't smashing windows.
Hmm.
We weren't, destroying anything. They started bringing us food because we had to stay in the building. Um, and then Dr. King was assassinated. It was like
Okay.
somewhere in the right. Students were very, very hurt, very angered. Um, just it felt like it feels now.
I was going to ask you,
Hmm. Felt
in what sense? We see the marches
like. Mhm.
not just here but all over the world. And I remember President Obama, who had his event a couple weeks ago, said it's got a similarity, but it's different.
Very different.
What is your thought about what's similar and what may be different this time?
The world was in shock when Dr. King was assassinated, and the world mourned him.
Hmm.
This time, I think, and I think that this pandemic has had its effect on humanity in a number of ways, and one of those ways is that it has brought forth the importance of kindness. You remember towards the beginning of this spread, after every announcement on television, after everything would say, and be kind, because people, you, it's like you, how could you not be kind to one another when you're facing, when everybody, all of humanity is facing an enemy that you can't get a handle on, you can't put a finger on, you don't know how to stop it, you don't know where it came from, you don't know where it's going. And it really did bring to everyone's consciousness, hey, guess what? Yeah, we really are all in this boat together,
That's true.
because this thing is not playing favorites. And all of a sudden, it really did become one humanity. So kindness and decency, these are these are things we're taught as children to be. And
That's right.
somewhere, yeah, we taught this as children.
Hmm.
And somewhere along the line, some of us forget and go off in strange ways. Um, when people saw these images of Mr. Floyd in the street all over the world, it was just an affront and a shock, because you saw people and you see people coming out in the street in spite of a pandemic.
Yes.
All of a sudden, no, it's
Enough.
people are demanding common decency. And this has many levels. This has many, 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 many levels. And it's a beautiful thing to see humanity come together to stand together for common human decency.
Amen. And you know what? Because it is persistent and so many businesses and organizations are taking to heart what does it mean, and using your language, to practice common decency. What does it mean to treat each other as equals? What does it mean? What does it look like?
Mhm.
And these are questions that are happening inside of the hallowed halls of every educational institution, every business of every size, and every neighborhood. And let's hope that common decency wins.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. May sanity rule. May
Now, you and
common.
I have talked about, and obviously you are an actor and have been at this for your your whole life. I wanted to ask you about your influences. And so in the context of the conversation that we're having, Ruby Dee and Ossie Davis, two of the greatest performers
Yep.
of the 20th century,
Yep.
but also two of the mightiest activists of the 20th century. And you've called them your mentors. Tell us why they are, and take us into your experience with them.
Okay. Um, Common sensibilities, right? And they were salt of the earth people. From the South, they came, and they achieved artistic excellence, and they continued to pursue. It never stopped. They continued the pursuit of artistic excellence. Didn't think twice about pulling up their children and taking them to the protest wherever they were going to stand on the corner, whatever they were doing. They were teaching their children by involving them. So their world was not a world that was limited to themselves. They really cared about people. They cared about community. They cared about the upliftment of the human condition. They cared about it. You saw it in their art.
Hmm.
You saw it in their interactions with people. And if you were fortunate enough, you saw it in their home.
They had a beautiful home.
They had a beautiful home, and Miss D grew collard greens. She gave me some.
Oh, and she was sassy too. Come on
She's
now.
a sassy little lady. She's a sassy little lady. We went to we flew to Buffalo one morning. We were part of a broadcast there, and we took the same flight and we came home, and I had my car, and so I offered her a ride home. She lived the town over from where I live, and she said, "Come in this house." And I came in the house, and she yanked off her shoes and put on her boots. She said, "I'll be right back." And she went outside and she came back with an arm full of greens. And I went running home and I said, "Mama, Mama, these greens came from Ruby Dee's garden."
I love it. I bet you they tasted extra good too, huh?
They really did. They were good.
Now, Felicia, let's talk about what it means to be an artist and to make tough choices. Because I've talked to many people in the arts. Many people struggle. Some do very well. Many people who are struggling in particular say they'll just take any role because they need to work.
Mhm.
And I know that that has not been the case for you. And I'm wondering about choice.
Mhm.
When you are attempting to make it in in the arts, and really this probably goes for any field, but let's stick with the arts because that's your area. How do you know what is the right job, and how do you turn down a job when you feel that it's not right?
Mm. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I had this little compass inside me that my mother had planted.
Mhm. Yes, mom.
Yes, she did. Yes, she did. And truthfully, it was nurtured by everybody in our community. And that is the truth. But this little thing inside, um, what was important, what my mother stressed as an artist, and I saw it in her work as a writer, what was important was the work itself. That you should grow in the work and allow the work to grow in you.
Mm.
That the intellect should be challenged and expand, and that your work should always be the best that you could do. Always do your best.
Mhm.
My mother never worried about fame, and she would get up every morning. Every morning, her writing hours were between 3 and 6 because that's when the world was asleep, and so were we. She was very, very disciplined. She never cared about fame. She never cared about money. What she cared about was expression and
Mhm.
openness. And what she cared about was being able to share that with other people. And so she shared it with us, three little ones at first. And then she shared it with our friends. And then she had friends of her own, like John Biggers. He was
Oh,
in our
the
home
artists.
all the
Yeah.
time. He was in our home all the time. He was from Gastonia, North Carolina. My mother was from Chester, South Carolina. I think they had met as children. Um, but this is how we lived.
Mhm.
And so it was,
It was just it's in the DNA of the family.
yeah,
And we know this about Black folk, the level of excellence that is expected. Not everybody knows it, especially people who may not be part of the culture, but like I know my father, what he told us is that excellence was the only option. There was no other option.
no other option.
None. So,
Uh,
like you, I was a straight A student. Why? Because
there was no
I
option.
didn't know you could be anything else.
You could, we were straight A students because our teacher said, you're going to learn this and you're going to excel because I know you
Exactly.
can and I know where you live. That was,
But you see, that makes a difference. That sense of, one of the things that we lost with desegregation
mm,
was the unity of the community. I mean, there are pros and cons for everything, but that one thing, and I've talked to many people, many elders in our culture who have talked about that. When you had everybody together, my mother used to say she had eyes in the back of her head, and sure enough, those eyes would be the neighbor, and this one would call before we got home.
yeah. Yeah, the community was beautiful,
Hmm.
beautiful to have. It was beautiful to be educated by people who were part of the community in which I lived. It was beautiful to be educated by some people who had taught my father. Um,
Mm.
it was great to be educated by people who believed in our capacity to excel.
Felicia, speaking of my mom, who I told you is 90, even now, before COVID, when we've been out, she was a kindergarten teacher. She stopped teaching in 1965 when my sister was born. There are still people who remember her. Hi, Miss Cole. You
Mhm.
taught me in the kindergarten
Mhm.
because they remember.
Yeah.
They remember.
I remember every teacher I ever had because they were wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't have teachers who thought I could learn only so much.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
that it's different now in many schools.
it's it's very different. I would have thought, that there were certain conversations I wouldn't have to have in regards to my
Hmm.
children and their education. My mother said, "No, you have to." My mother said, "You have to fight for your children,
Yes.
and sometimes you have to fight them." That's what she said.
She
She
wasn't
said
wrong.
she
She
wasn't wrong.
wasn't wrong. Okay,
Mm.
I want to talk about Claire Huxtable. And,
Okay.
because here's the thing, people do call you America's TV mom.
Mm.
And there are many people who say that, who fervently believe that the Cosby Show set the stage for Obama. In
Mm.
this sense, you grew up like the Huxtables. I grew up like the Huxtables. A whole bunch of other people did or didn't. But those who did, often there were others who, even in the Black community, who didn't believe that that world existed. And the Cosby Show helped to illustrate that a Black family with professionals having the same problems everybody else has is real. It showed this reality that was for some a secret. But the responsibility for you was pretty intense to become this iconic figure. What did it feel like in the beginning? Did you know how big it was going to be, that it would just grow into this international sensation?
No, I didn't. I never gave it a thought. I didn't think about it for a very, very long time. And one day my mother said, "You just don't see yourself the way other people see you.
Mm,
You just don't see yourself the way other people see you." I said, "Well, I guess not, Mom, and that's okay." Because I'm just busy being me. Um, I didn't think of it as a responsibility. I, it was so joyful.
mhm,
There was tremendous joy in it because you know what? This was a singular work in which I was able to express and experience my long held belief that people are much more alike than we could ever be different.
mhm.
And that show was living proof. It went all over the world, and all over the world, in countries near and far, people saw themselves in that family.
And in terms of the people all over the world seeing themselves in that family,
Mhm.
what did that mean for the Black family?
Oh, well, if people had imagined themselves different, now they understood that that wasn't so,
Mhm,
and little kids, there's that song, that song in South Pacific, you have to be carefully taught.
mhm,
You have to be carefully taught to be afraid of people. You have to be carefully taught
mhm,
to discriminate against people. You have to be carefully taught to disrespect people and think that that's okay to do because of your ethnicity or your social status. You have to be carefully taught that way. But the young people and the people who were viewing the show, they were having another kind of experience. Even here in this country, people were seeing themselves in a family that didn't look like them. And you know what? Not only are people more alike than we could ever be different, but given the opportunity, people are willing and wanting to embrace the likenesses because that's truth and that's real. And you know what else is a whole lot easier than all this other?
we have to keep reminding ourselves. I mean, that's, as you say, carefully taught. I think that what that show did was to carefully teach through illustration.
Hmm.
And there are a lot of questions. One of the questions that's come up right now with this new awakening is that some of the images, a majority of the images in programming in Hollywood and all the different places where programming from where it emerges, that there's some questions about the characters and the plot lines, and where are the positive stories and are there enough? And hopefully this reset that everyone is doing will take into account storytelling because it's so important.
Well, you know what? Everybody doesn't live the same way. Okay, so there was the Cosby Show, yes? Another great work that I've been privileged to participate in is David Makes Man.
Yes.
Now, this is not the Cosby Show. These people do not live like the Huxtables. These people are human beings. There is love, there is joy, there is sadness, there is challenge. They're all the same kinds of things, just in a different way. I think what's really important is that humanity be presented in its fullness and with respect. That's what makes the difference.
That's fair. I want to talk about the great August Wilson.
Okay?
And as I shared, you performed in Gem of the Ocean on Broadway and then you directed it.
Mm.
You spent time with this mastermind who documented the 20th century from the perspective of an African American. What did you learn from August Wilson?
Rhythm.
Mm,
If you look at the canon of plays, the canon of 10 plays, there there's so much layered in them, but rhythm. Okay, what am I referring to? Rhythm in the language. That's one. If you follow it from Gem of the Ocean to Radio Golf, you see the rhythm changing.
mhm,
The rhythm is changing. By the time you get to Radio Golf, some of the characters seem to be arrhythmic. They seem to have no rhythm at all. Now, I had, I was educated in the drama department by Owen Dotson, for goodness sake. We studied iambic pentameter.
sure.
We studied classical Greek theater. But I didn't have this understanding and this feeling for rhythm until I got to August Wilson.
Mm.
And then after I got to August Wilson, all of a sudden Shakespeare became, oh yeah, oh, rhythm. Really understanding the power of rhythm inherent in language and what that rhythm can create. Sometimes I would be sitting in my room on Esther's room off stage, and I'd be listening to this one scene we called the mentoring scene, where Sally and Eli are talking to Citizen, telling him about the Underground Railroad and their adventures there and the importance of it and what it means, and trying to encourage him to join in on it. The way he wrote those passages, I was sitting there one night and all of a sudden the voices just faded. The human voices went away. And all I was hearing was rhythm.
Wow.
And it was like every character was an instrument, a drum, and each had their own rhythm. And together they created this symphony of sound which conveyed their meaning to me. I was sitting there having this experience and I wondered, oh, how am I going to go on stage after this? Somebody help me, please.
And but how did you take this spiritual experience of his work and embody it in your character?
Well, for quite some time, I've been a student of City Yoga meditation. This is such a beautiful and important practice. I won't even try to give a little flip phrase for what it is because you can't.
And
But
I
what
will say that this is something else that we share,
yes,
so I understand.
you understand what I'm
And
saying.
and 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 just for context for those listening, a lot of people know a little bit about meditation and that it's powerful and it may seem different, but when you do it, you realize you're connecting to the greatness inside of you.
The
And
greatness inside of you. And without that practice, I don't think I could have performed Aunt Esther
mm,
because that's who she was. Aunt Esther was connected to the truth inside her own heart. She was connected to everything that had gone before her, everything that was right in her present time, and everything that would come after, long after she was gone. And because of her connection and her accessibility, she could touch people in a certain way to lead them to that within themselves as well. It was a very powerful and spiritual experience to perform that play each and every night. And people felt the same way in the audience. There
Mm.
was a gentleman who came from Germany. I learned this after a performance. He didn't speak English very, very well. And he sat there throughout the play listening, and he didn't quite get it. He didn't quite understand, and people laughed. He didn't know what people were laughing at. But there is a scene in there which is really about spiritual awakening, which is really about an inner journey. It takes place
Mhm.
in her living room. It takes place in her living room, the physicality of it. But the young man is being led to truth inside himself, all right, through ritual, okay? I was told that this man said after that scene, he understood everything that had happened before and everything that happened afterwards.
All right.
And he didn't speak English any better than he did when he walked in the door. So, you know, spiritual connection is something that we have. We're not always aware of it. And when I say we, I mean people in the world. Because there's but one source for everything. And we all come from that one source, that one life. We're part of that one life.
And that goes back to what you were saying about this moment in time, this time of reset.
Mm.
When I mean, we've been home for 3 months, some for longer.
Yep.
And, it's one thing to choose to be home and another to be ordered to be home. And during this time, you know, I heard someone describe it as sheltering in grace.
Ah,
And depending upon how you spend your time, what are those thoughts, words, and deeds that you allow
mm,
to occupy the space
mm,
will determine what happens next. And perhaps there are a lot of people who are rethinking what's important. Wow, I get to spend this much time with my family. I don't want this to end. Or,
right.
I'm remembering to connect with people that I was too busy to call. I don't want to do that. Whatever those things are, here's hoping that it's been a spiritual reset for many people, you
Yeah.
know?
Yes. Yes. And don't you kind of feel that it has?
I do. I do. And I'm
I do.
hoping a lot of people feel that way.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that it's not that it is as universal as possible. Now let's go to something else.
Okay.
During this time, very practically,
Mhm.
we know that I think the latest numbers are 44 million people who have recently filed for unemployment. Many people are out of work. This is a time of tremendous pivot
Mm,
for everyone in one way or another. We talk about the spiritual reset, but also the practical, how do we take care of ourselves and what do we do?
mm,
And, for you, we just had talked about Blue opening up at the Apollo. It was supposed to open in April. We
yeah.
were celebrating coming
Yeah.
to Harlem,
Yeah.
and that's on pause right now. And so
Yeah.
what does it mean for your work at a time when, gatherings are not allowed, and we know that they will be allowed in bits, but not in the same way for a very long time. What is the pivot for Phylicia Rashad?
You mean professionally?
Yes.
There are other things. So this is a wonderful time to do voiceover work.
Mm.
You know, one of the things that I've been engaged in for the past year, yeah, for the past year, is recording audiobooks for Kobe
Mm.
Bryant's books, his series, the Wizardon
Yeah.
series. I have enjoyed that work tremendously. That has been some of the most meaningful work for me because it's for young readers and uh, and his stories. He uses sports as a metaphor for character development. He uses
Mhm.
sports as a metaphor and also as a tool and as a way to develop one's best self. and you just have to see it. You have to read it. You just got to read it. Okay, they're really great books. So I've been doing that, and
And I was so happy, just on that for a moment, I'm so happy that his legacy will live on in this way for young people. What an incredible loss. But
yeah,
before he left us, did you have the opportunity to interact with him in working on this project at all?
he directed the first session,
Yes.
and I looked at him. I said, I don't know why you asked me to do this. You could have done this yourself. He was brilliant. He was a man of many talents. His capacities were broad. I mean, that landscape was broad. He was very thoughtful. He was very sensitive. He was deliberate. And I met his family. They all came
Mhm,
to the first session. What a beautiful, beautiful,
mhm.
loving family. Just it was really a gift. And these books are a gift.
Yes.
They are a gift that you talk about leaving a legacy. You talk about leaving an imprint. He was very, very happy about these books. He
I'm
was
so
very,
happy
very
to hear
happy.
that.
Oh, yes, because he was happy to give them and impact young people in a way to the extent that he made sure that each one is bound.
Mhm.
When you see these books, the physical book you hold in your hand,
Yeah.
it's like a treasure, it's like a gift because he wanted them bound that way.
What are they called, Felicia?
It's the Wizenard series.
Mhm.
It's a Wizenard series.
Wonderful. And
Uh,
what's the age group that they're written for?
well, let's see. If somebody reads to children, they don't have to know how
Right.
to read, but
Mhm.
they'll understand the stories on through teenage years. But hey, I'm a seasoned adult, and I love
Very good.
it.
We have only a few minutes left, but I want to talk for a moment about Tyler Perry.
Oh, okay.
Uh, because one of the things is, and in thinking of AARP and being an organization that's really for our mature selves,
Mhm.
Tyler has been very methodical about including actors of every age, many Black actors who weren't working. He has taken under his wing, but also, he's got you. He's got Cicely Tyson. I mean, we're so excited to see the range of talent that he brings, and I'm just curious about what your experience of working with him.
Um, the first time I saw him in person was on the set of For Colored Girls,
Hmm.
and we were shooting an exterior scene, and he walked out into the street, and he's a very tall man.
Yes,
You know, he's a
very, yeah.
physically present man, and he walked with a very sure but gentle stride, and he looked up at a crane and he said, "That shouldn't be there. That should be over here." And I looked at him and said, "Oh." He knows exactly what he wants. It's not up in the air with him. He knows what he's looking for. Um, when you work with him, you are treated very well. He's kind to people,
Hmm.
and that says a lot.
It does.
It says everything. He's very, 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 very kind to people. He's very, very serious, and then in an instant, he can be so silly.
I remember when I met him at his previous studio. It was when I was running Ebony Magazine, and we went to the studio, and he was so serious. I was like, "Is this the same person? Is this Medea?"
Yeah, 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 yeah.
He's all of it wrapped up in one.
He's all of that, and he works constantly. One time I asked him, "Baby, do you ever sleep?" I had to know because he works constantly.
Yes.
all the time.
And he's very specific. There's no
Right.
question about
No
that
question
one.
about that. Mm-mm.
All right, Felicia, when you think about your life and all the things that you've experienced, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Ooh. I'd say, baby, it's going to be all right. Don't worry about that. Mm-mm, don't look over there. It's not over there. No, don't look over there. It's not over there. Remember what your mother told you. Remember what
Always remember what your mother told
your
you.
mother told you. Yeah, it's growing up is not easy
No.
in any place, and coming to New York after graduating from Howard University was exciting and challenging in a number of ways. Um, you meet a lot of different people and a lot of different kinds of people
Hmm.
because people are coming from different backgrounds and their experiences are very different. Um, I was surprised to meet people who didn't feel the love of their parents.
Yes.
You know, I tell myself, sit still, child, be still and know, because one of the things that I have really seen, and I think back in those earlier years and being in New York, was that you hear it, you read it in books and you hear it in lectures now, but to see it for yourself as a young person without people saying it to you, when people don't have love for themselves, it's very, very difficult for them to respond lovingly to anyone else when they
That's
don't
right.
have love for themselves. It's so important to always love your own self. That's what I would tell myself.
That's good advice. What would you say about you that has gotten better with age?
Hmm, I don't know.
Oh, come on, you got to give us hope here.
I don't know. I'm trying to think. What has gotten better. I don't know. So, um, I think I think I'm much calmer. Although I always did think of myself as being calm, but people who have known me for a very, very long time, after I began the practice of sit yoga meditation, they began to say, "Oh, you're different.
Hmm.
Oh, you seem so much calmer now." And I think that is certainly true.
And let's talk about meditation for a second, because I'd love for you to share with folks before we leave
Hmm.
something they can do to stay grounded during this time. When we are thoughtful, we are uh, every emotion. There's pain, there's joy, there's fear, and what can you offer to folk that could help them navigate these moments that we're in right now?
Apart from the ugliness of some of the things that have happened recently, there's a lot of beauty that has happened as well. We don't get to hear about that as often, and it isn't shown to us as often. What I do is I stop looking at certain things, and I try to remind myself I can't control what other people say and do. but I do have the ability and the privilege and the right to direct the course of my own mind.
Mm.
You know,
And so we must.
oh, we must, we must.
Well,
Yeah.
my dear, we have reached our hour. Thank you so much. It has been such a privilege to spend this time with you. We are grateful.
We always have fun.
It's always fun. And
Always.
guess who's coming up next week? Andre DeShields,
Stop what you say, girl.
Tony Award winner from Hadestown, my homeboy. He's from Baltimore, our friend,
Yes.
and he will be joining us next week. Thank you, Phylicia. Thank you so much. And just sending my love to you. And we're sending it to everyone who's joined us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Harriet. And my love to your mom.
Oh, thank you. And to yours.
Thank you.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.